allegiance, so we can just go ahead and do that. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic which stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Now I wanted to go ahead and take a look at the approval of the minutes. I believe we actually had, if memory serves me right, two that we actually needed to approve. One was the minutes for the meeting for November 17th, 2020, which should be attached to your agenda. Is there any motion to approve that?
Move to approve. Second.
Okay. Any discussion on the minutes from November 17th? Mr. Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's still no mention of the people that made public comment in there, and I have a problem with that, so I will not be supporting the minutes.
And was this the same kind of related comments that I know yourself and a couple others had, including myself, last meeting?
That was one of the comments that I made, was the lack of recording of the public comments that were made. I didn't need full comments, but the public that spoke should have been listed.
Right. Now for staff, I know we're all learning here, but can I get any kind of clarification on what the future process is for recording public comment or the protocol for that?
Yes, I can start adding names to the public comment.
Okay, thanks, Kimmy. Well, with that, we still have a motion and a second on the floor. So any other discussion on that? Going forward, we'll make sure to have that approved. Okay, can I get a vote in the affirmation to approve the minutes for November 17th, please?
I don't want to vote.
Diane?
Oh, sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Is that okay? Is that acceptable? We're doing verbal, Kimmy?
Yes.
That's acceptable? Okay. Okay, any nays? Mr. Bear, Mr. Green? Okay. Moving on.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, sir.
and I know that they don't have to actually give an explanation, so I did see two nays. I think Mr.
Sorry, Mr. Bear.
Bear, and then, but I saw Mr. Green also. What was your unreadiness?
Only because I was not here. I don't want to.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And then I believe Mr. Bear's, you may have just walked in, I'm sorry about that, was just regarding a more descriptive recording of the public comments. So going forward, we'll make sure to do that.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'd also like, I think Mr. Bear mentioned this last time as well, I'd appreciate if the minutes reflected the verbatim terms of any motions made. Because I don't know that occurred in the last minutes either. I think that would be, I realize it's in video.
I added that in to the minutes that's in front of you, the verbatim to the motion.
Is that from the last meeting or the meeting before?
Yes, sir, from the last meeting.
I think the meeting before still lacked it, but the last meeting reflected those changes that we wanted. And if that's the case, we'll go ahead and move on with that. So for the minutes for meeting December 1st, 2020, do I have a motion for approval?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay, any discussion on December 1st minutes? Oh, yeah, Mr. Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. These have a few more issues. First of all, if you look at the minutes, I guess this is page, what page are we on here? Page 8 of your packet. In the roll call, Mr. Durant is not listed as being absent, but in the vote for the approval of minutes, he is listed as being absent. So I know he was there for, at least for the elections, because he denied or declined the nomination. I don't know when he actually got there, but I don't know how he could be absent for the approval of the minutes if he was there at the beginning of the meeting. So that's incorrect. I think that there are not enough comments. In the approval of the minutes, or the fact that we didn't approve the minutes, There's nothing recorded there as to, after we voted them down, what we were gonna do, and I think that needed to be recorded in there. That's important for the public to know. We weren't just abandoning these minutes forever. The election of the chair is an absolute train wreck. I've never seen an election done in this fashion. I mean, all our staff has to do is look at city council minutes or any other board and see you wouldn't have individual items for the nomination of each person and then record the exact same vote for every one. This was an election, wasn't done as separate items. That is just poorly worded, is not an accurate reflection of what we did. There are errors throughout these minutes. I'll point out one on page 11 of your packet, which is page 4 of the minutes, but 11 of your packet. Item 3, which is the first item on page 11 of your packet, the third paragraph down under number 3, to make the Pensacola Police Department, and then there's a symbol, and RSQO semicolon S, things that should be caught, and apparently were not looked over or edited before they were brought to our attention. So I will not be supporting these minutes either.
I would agree, Mr. Bear, and again, I know we're all learning here, but we do have the protocol from the city council and other boards to follow. What I would suggest, I know we still have a motion on the floor, is just to have these corrected for the next meeting. Is that something you want to propose?
Okay with that, yeah.
Okay. I know we still have a motion and a second on the table. Is that still the case?
Well, do we want to move to approve and with the fact that she's going to correct, or do we want to deny until they're corrected?
Yeah.
Or is that the question?
That's a question, Mr. Bear.
I can make a motion to amend.
Okay.
I move that we amend the motion to submit these back to staff for corrections prior to the next meeting.
Second.
Okay, so we amicable with that?
Yes.
Okay,
So that in effect, it means we're not voting to approve.
correct.
Okay.
Well, we'd have to vote on that first, on the amendment first, and that would take the place of the other.
So just so that I'm clear, any corrections that people want to be made should be submitted to staff prior to the next meeting so they can be incorporated?
Sure. I'm fine with that.
Okay, staff says yes. All right, so we need to vote on this motion first, I believe.
The amendment.
Okay, the amendment. So all in favor of the amendment as proposed by Mr. Bear?
Aye.
Aye.
One hands.
Aye. Any nays? Okay, does that take care of it? Thank you. All right, outside from logistics, let's go on to, go back to my agenda here. So I had discussion items kind of loaded up on this agenda. I know it's just before all of the holidays and ongoing holidays right now, so I don't want to load you guys down too much, but as the new chair, I of course do want to kind of reiterate, we've been going on this for about 6 months now. We were formed in July. We're going on with our second chair now through different circumstances. And I do want to make sure, I've served on enough boards. I know many of the members here have as well. Efficiency is always a key. We all have other jobs. Obviously, this is a close, passionate project for all of us, along with members of the community. But I'd like us to get a bit narrower scope before we get too wide of a swath of objectives here. So that kind of ties into the discussion items I have lined up that I wanted to go into. The first one was number 3, a monthly report on the initiatives and updates from PPD. I'd like to have this become an ongoing monthly report. So I wanted to get Chief Leiter's designate. I believe we have Deputy Chief Crispin up here, and he'll provide us with an update on the department's ongoing initiatives and also with any kind of CPAC requests that we have outstanding. So Deputy Chief Crispin.
Just a couple of updates from 2 weeks ago. We talked about the CIT, Trauma-Informed Policing Training, which is through Lakeview. We're still working with them. The issue with that is COVID. In order to have the instruction with Lakeview, we're looking right now at a spring timetable, COVID allowing, and it'll boil down to when Lakeview is comfortable conducting that in-person training. So we are working toward that. We're looking toward a spring timetable right now. McGee Field, Captain Reese had discussions with Mr. Caldwell with McGee Field. They're going to meet after the new year, once we get through the holidays, and discuss the best way to move forward and partnering with them in a mentorship program, and potentially bringing in some of the other locations, such as maybe Legion Field, which is on the west side of Pensacola. So that effort is ongoing as well. The question was raised the last meeting, how many officers we had participate in the Thanksgiving food, where we took Thanksgiving meals to 55 families. We had approximately 25 of our officers who came in and worked on that. I'd like to take this time on Monday, the 21st of December. We will be providing Christmas for 110 kids in our community. We'll start at 11 a.m. with the Rally Foundation for Childhood Cancer, providing some Christmas gifts for kids involved in that program. We'll be at the Maritime Park. On the west side of the park, there's that drive that goes down into the cul-de-sac by the playground. Because of COVID, we've had to kind of change our method, how we're going to distribute those presents. So it'll be kind of a drive-through set up for the kids and their families to come through. We'll start at 11 with the Rally Foundation. And then at 2 o'clock, we will begin with families in the community who are identified to us as in need that we can help. And we're going to be able to provide Christmas for 110 kids. So I'd like to invite all of you to that. And you can see firsthand with your own eyes the interaction that your police department has with the community.
Thank you, Chief. Was there any comments from the board on any items outstanding from PPD? I know they have a few requests into them right now that they'd asked for presentation in January after the holidays, but outside that, was there anything else? Mr. Remington?
I apologize, I wasn't here. One of the items, a report on the Florida Chiefs recommendations or report that came out.
Correct, and I could ask more clarification.
I submitted a memo through Mr. Wilkins in the mayor's office to provide to the CPAC that our general orders and our rules and regulations reflect that Florida Police Chiefs Association report that we went over last time.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll just make sure that gets to us. Anything else?
I wanted to back up. Deputy Chief said that there were 25 officers that participated in the giveaway.
In the Thanksgiving?
In the Thanksgiving
Approximately
giveaway?
25, yes, sir.
Approximately 25. Could we get those names? I just would like to have that just for my record.
I can work on that for you for the next meeting if we have that available.
All right, thank you.
Mr. Chair, just a point of clarification on this item. You're seeking a monthly report. Did you mean monthly, or is that every meeting? Because we're twice a month.
So I meant monthly, but
Okay.
I'm certainly open to,
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that,
yeah. Of course, you all have jobs to do too, but I'm open to updates whenever PPD can come down here, but at least monthly was my intention. with that.
We'll always have a representative here to answer specific questions. I think monthly reports are probably appropriate, so we're 2 weeks down the road. I'm giving you the same information we had 2 weeks ago. But I think a monthly report will probably be more concise and a better use of the time of the committee.
are you seeking volunteers for your assistance at that Christmas on the 21st, or you got that covered so where we would just be going to watch?
You can come and watch. We've got plenty of participation within the department and from the family that helped sponsor that. That can do that. We've had one off-duty patrol shift volunteered to come in and help with that in addition to everyone else who's participating. So
I'd like to help if there's open
we've got a
rooms.
bunch of officers, so we're happy to see y'all there.
Kimmy, can you send, I know you have enough to do. Can you send out like an email to all of us on the details on that? Thank you. Anything else? Going once? Okay, we'll move on to discussion item number 2. I know we had discussed this before, thank you, Deputy Chief, on the committee's purpose. I wanted to get a little bit more kind of solidified on that. There is still seems to be confusion and discussion, at least from my vantage point, and I think from other committee members' vantage points when they're out in the community, of what exactly we do, what exactly who we are. Are we oversight? Are we auditor? Are we monitoring? Are we review, investigatory? All these things. Obviously, legal has been told what we can do and can't do under the mayor's purview. This is a mayor's committee, not a council committee. I did want to solidify it with the establishment of a mission statement. This is a discussion item, so we wouldn't be taking any action on it tonight. But I wanted to see what the board's preference was on this topic in general. And if that would be necessary, I think it would give not only the public, but us in general, a sure view of what we should be doing. Any discussion on that? Yes.
I absolutely agree with you. I think it's important to have something in writing that clarifies exactly what we're doing so that we always have that to go back to as our starting point. And I agree that drafting a formal mission statement for our committee would be a good move.
And the end product of this, I'd like for to obviously be on the website, where I think most of the information is accessed on our committee, but obviously on any literature or agenda items, I think that would be important. Next month, I think January 5th is our next meeting. I'd like to come back with something that's proposed as a mission statement for review, but certainly if any committee members have something they'd like to suggest, that can obviously be proposed as well. Yes, Gina?
Since this is like a mayor committee, I don't know if we already have what our limitations are. I would like to know if we do or if we don't, but.
Sure. I know legal counsel isn't here, but from my understanding, and maybe staff or the mayor can clarify, that was my question at the onset too, is I know there's other Florida municipalities that have committees with actually investigatory subpoena power. But my understanding is that under the mayor's office, that we can't have that.
I do believe that, and I'll be happy to get with Susan, Susan Wolf, who's the city attorney, to direct even the committees that you're talking about, Drew. They end up because of some legal precedent, they don't have as much as they anticipated. I think she tried to explain all that in the very first meeting, the issues that are there. But you're exactly right, because this is a mayor's committee, that option was not necessarily there, even if you passed the policy. But she indicated, I think in her first reading, communicating that even if you had a council committee, the state of Florida, based on the current things, we don't, certain case law and precedents, that we don't have that option in the state of Florida. So at this point, what we are looking for you to do is provide advice to us through all the things that we have. Even we've allowed, we've been very open with what we've allowed you to do and other things, and certainly there are things that may not fit exactly what we were looking at, but from our standpoint, much of the issue is the Pensacola Police Department is made up of its policies, procedures, and protocols that have been provided to you, and I think those have the biggest impact on who the Pensacola Police Department is. Now, there have been a lot of discussion about other things that surround it, and we have been working with the committee to work within that. But I think the biggest thing that defines who the Pensacola Police Department is the protocols, procedures, and policies that we have that have been provided to you at the very beginning of this process. So I think that was kind of the essence and the expectation of what was there. There have been a number of other things that have been discussed. And I certainly think those are things that will be noted, and you've taken votes, and they'll certainly be a part of the report. But I think one of the things that was an expectation from the city is that we would look at the things that were in those policies and procedures.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Now, Gina, did you have a specific inquiry into that question beyond what you had?
No, I was curious if we could have that written down somewhere to,
Sure.
see if our recommendations are possible.
So when you say written down, do you mean for an external audience, like the public, or for us?
For us.
For us, okay. I'm sure staff can certainly look into that, just have that written down in our procedures or whatnot.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
I would also like to say that this kind of goes back to our minutes. If our minutes are a little bit more clear, then our new members could read those minutes probably in a lot faster time than our newest member having to watch all of our committee meetings, because the scope has shifted somewhat over all of these meetings, and so perhaps, you know, just, it's really important for those minutes to be good, not only for the public, but also for future members, because I know that there is still a question about whether or not this is gonna be an evergreen board. You know, I'm hopeful that we get a report and we can accomplish our mission and not be evergreen, but at the same time, if it does end up being that way, then we need, you know, we need to be able to have rotating members that can catch up.
Understood, thank you.
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yes.
You know, to help Gina along, if you go to the video of July 9th, which is our first meeting, Susan Wolf, she starts off with the first part of public records law. And then at about the 38-minute mark, she gets into exactly what this board can and cannot do. She was not ambiguous at all in that meeting. So if you go back and watch that part of it, you'll have a very clear picture of.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I've actually watched all of the videos, but I just wanted to know if that could potentially be written down. I don't know if it was already written down.
Yes, and I'll go look back at the website outside with staff to make sure everything, because yeah, that's kind of the point we're going back to is it needs to be explicitly clear, not only just to us as a board, but the public as well, what we can and cannot do and what our purpose is. So I will go back and look at that, staff.
Hey,
Yes.
I did just want to mention Casey Lagarde, Public Information Officer. If I'm not mistaken, and I know we're all learning as we go and trying to get better, but if I recall the conversations correctly with the early versions of the minutes, we were told that it didn't need to be a transcript and it was too detailed. So I just want to make sure we have clear direction on, and I think Kimmy has been reviewing, you know, other boards' minutes and kind of using that as a template. And we're certainly open to, you know, criticism and constructive criticism and improvements, but I just want to make sure that we have clear direction, because I think I've heard, just from my observations, I've heard both directions, that it was too detailed, and then maybe we dialed it back too much, so.
No, thank you, Casey. I think that's actually pretty on point. From my recollections, I haven't gone back to look at hours and hours of our meetings, but I think at the beginning we did possibly discuss that, and it may have gotten lost in translation, but I think it is the consensus of the board that we want to have it mimic other city boards and specifically city council. So with that, was there anything else on that specifically? Mr. Bear?
Mr. Chairman, I heard the mayor saying almost the same thing he said last meeting about what he wants us to do. So my concern is, with the mission statement, is our mission statement going to reflect that we are doing a report and we're done? Or are we continuing after the mission statement? That's my question. I mean, after the report is done. Is that our end goal? Is that when we get dissolved, or are we going to continue in existence after we do that report?
Sure. Well, as of now, I'm operating under the assumption that this is I don't like to use this term all the time, but as Autumn said, evergreen. So we're a standing board, I think would be more appropriate to say. We do all have, not term limits, but terms. And I think they all expire in 2022, or someone correct me. So as of this moment, until the board decides otherwise, for us to dissolve at a certain time and date, the mission statement, in my view, would be just a standing mission purpose statement. And we can discuss that next meeting. Again, I will bring one before the board, but if any committee members have something that they'd like to bring for adoption, we can do that as well.
Mr. Chair, what was your recommendation? Was your recommendation that someone bring a statement that we discuss, or you were going to create one and then we discuss that?
I will create one, and I will bring it back to the board next month, but certainly I don't want to stop anyone else from bringing one as well.
No, that's good. That's good. You know, if it can be sent out to us early so that we have time to look at it prior to the meeting, and then we can bring our thoughts and tear it up from there.
Can we do that, staff? So, can we have?
We can absolutely take a statement that one person has and send it to everyone. What we cannot do is send your revisions, it stops with one person, that's all we can do.
Yeah, well, that's fine. That gives us just a little bit of time to start thinking and making our own notes.
So if the chair or somebody else, we'll be happy to reach out to the chair and see what we can work with them and make sure we can get that out. It can be sent to everyone. Everyone would have it. They can look at it, edit it, and come here. But what we can't do is for you to send in and say, okay, here are my revisions to this. At that point, we could not do that because that would be a sunshine issue. But there is no problem with taking one statement and sending it out. It's the communication that comes back the second time. That creates communication. It's two-way.
That's very helpful. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So we'll act with that. With Autumn, do you have one more thing?
Oh, yeah, I did have a question. Can we, if we do have a proposed mission statement, can we just submit that to you and you put it as an agenda item?
No, and, well, not if he's gonna do one. You can only have one and go from there. You could provide mission statements to Kimmy, and we could work within that, but you do not provide it to anyone else on
Right. No,
on
my
the position.
suggestion, Mayor, was to put it on the agenda as a proposed item through Kimmy,
Sure.
not to disseminate it through the staff, but if I had
Yeah.
one that I would.
No,
submit-
you can send it to Kimmy, that's fine.
Yeah, okay. And that way, if there is, if somebody wants to have more than one to consider, it
Right.
could be, okay.
And again, this is more symbolic than anything, but I thought it was important to have. I guess.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to also include, we talk a lot about doing the report for the mayor's office, and I'd like to kind of get some of your feedback on this as well. But as I see the value of this committee, a lot of it's in what we're doing right here, having PPD in the room, having the opportunity to have these back and forth discussions. So while I feel like the report is important and it's a milestone that we need to meet, I also think that we should include in our mission statement the notion of the fellowship that we share here and how that kind of works to build those bonds between the police department and the community.
Very well put. Thank you. Anything else? Okay, we'll move on from there. And then in that line, I wanted to discuss the next discussion item, which was the timeline and delivery of the report to the mayor's office. I also wanted to include city council on this. Obviously, again, this is the mayor's standing committee, but I think city council, as the legislative body that sets the budget, I think it's important for them to be included as well. So with that said, it is important that we do begin drafting priorities when it comes to the budget cycle. The mayor's office has asked that March 2021, if I'm not mistaken, was the preferred no later than deadline for a report. And I think I mentioned last meeting that, in my view, it should resemble somewhat of a progress report type publication, similar to the transition team. Of course, there are issues that need to be solved now that may not necessarily need funding. But I think that's for us to be seen by the community as successful and perceived by the community, which is just as important as what we actually are doing. I think that's really important for us to do so we can start checking off some things to get them done. So with that said, I wanted to open up for discussion. I know in one of our first meetings, we had priorities set, and those have been recorded for us to review, but I wanted to begin the process of actually drafting these priorities for the board to start looking at for publication. So with that, I wanted to open up for discussion.
Well, I think to start, I think one of the things that we would need as we prioritize this is cost associated with the items. So that, I mean, that's what's going back in a timely manner so that it can be budgeted. So I guess part of this discussion would be how do we gain that cost? To start that with the McGee Field effort, and if that were to expand to other fields, is there a cost associated with officers being involved and the timeliness of uniform officers being involved? How much time at each field? What is the cost of that? I think we would have to know that so that we could ask for those funds. How is it going to be budgeted? What is it going to cost? So we kind of got to get into the nitty gritty of who's going to do what and where, and then find out how much it's going to cost. I know that I had a recommendation. It was interesting. It was actually from Autumn's husband. and he said, one of the requirements of the fire department is that they're required to volunteer a certain amount of time to get a promotion. So I don't know if we start utilizing those type of factors as well, but I would like to understand what the cost is gonna be and how broad that portion is gonna be.
Well, they don't pay them to volunteer.
Well, that's what I mean.
Kind of the essence of volunteerism is that you don't get paid for it.
Yeah, but we don't have that in the police department,
Yeah.
so that
Well,
means
we
there
don't know
would be a
that.
cost.
We don't know. Do we have that? We haven't asked Chief if we have incentives or anything about volunteers, but I see police volunteering all the time. You know, and probably on their own time. I'm very happy to hear that there's been a partnership with Rally Foundation, the Bear family and the Bonner family that have helped really spur that. That's a great partnership that they've formed. But I mean, you know, they're not, I think that might be a little bit of a misstatement to say that they're required to volunteer. They do things, you know, like they go to a Christmas parade. In their mind, that's a volunteer effort. Same with our police department. When we have things going on, which we don't have very much anymore, you know, we see police there. They man those events. And some of that being volunteer. I don't think that our committee is charged with giving line item budget ideas. I know we keep going back to this, but this has been, we've just talked about this over and over and over. This committee is supposed to be giving advice to the police department on how they can improve their procedures, their policies, their reputations, their, you know, everything that goes along with it. Perhaps their mental health. This isn't a one-sided committee. This is supposed to be a benefit for the police as well. And if we have police officers that come in here every single week and all we're doing is saying, well, what's this gonna cost and how much can you do and all of this, instead of saying, what can we do in our community so that we don't have community members that don't trust you, so that if you pull them over, they can trust that they've done something, so that then you're safe, so then you keep us safe, then we're failing. We're failing at this project. And we have to keep that central. We're not here to defund police. None of us have talked about that in this committee. We're here to support the police and also improve the relationship and the procedures and the practices of our police department. And a lot of things that we've asked and we've said that we need our police to do, they're coming back here and they're saying they've done it. They're doing it, they're doing it, they're doing it. They're right in line with the documents that we've provided them, you know? And so we can keep going on tangents, but we really have to get to the point where we can say, what is important to the police? What can they do? What is important to our community? What can the community do? And how do we formulate this together? And I just don't think it's our job to worry about how much it's gonna cost. I think that that's for the city council. And the mayor can correct me if I'm wrong, but that's been my understanding from the get-go.
Well, the mayor has come back and said that you need to get budget items in at a certain time.
I believe he said, and he can clarify, I believe his comment was, if something is going to have a fiscal impact, we can't really get it into the budget or consider it if it's not in by a deadline. I don't think he tasked us with deciding what the cost of it was and saying, please fund this. I think it's more, this is probably gonna cost some money. Yeah, that's not really our job. Y'all figure this out. We want it in so y'all can figure it out.
I understand. I think there may be some overlapping confusion there. I think the consensus is, you know, of course, if we propose something, we just want to have a general understanding of what it would cost. We don't necessarily want to figure out how we're going to fund it, right? That's city council's job and the mayor. But, you know, when it comes down, obviously this report is going to include a hybrid of things, you know, new policies, new procedures, new programs, you know, for funding social work, outreach teams. Obviously that's going to possibly be a significant line item. It's not our job, like you said, Autumn, to figure out how we're going to fund it. But I think we could at least propose or have staff assess how much it could cost. So I think, is everyone on the same page there? Because again, this isn't written in our rules and procedures. We don't really have any, right? So we're figuring this out along the way.
Yeah, I mean, I like the fact, and I agree with Autumn, that it's two-sided. You know, we make the recommendations and they take it from there. I mean, it doesn't sound like we've got much to prioritize.
Right.
Sounds like we give them the list and they take it and they come back with whatever they want to, you know, vote on, put into effect, and then we move on.
Mr. Mayor?
Thank you. And Autumn, I think the most valuable thing that this group can give us is advice and ideas. I think the McGee Field thing is a great idea. We're already beginning that process, and we're even looking at what it can implement. I think as far as delving down into the budget, that's what we will do as the administration. The administration put forward the budget. We create the budget. We bring that forward to the council. The council does approve it, but it's the administration that puts forward the budget. So if you have budgetary items, we simply need to know. We will work to make sure that we can get them in. I'm not saying we can do everything in 1 year, but our idea is to simply figure out ways that they can build upon. So I don't think you necessarily, Kyle, need to do everything on as far as what you want to do to the number. I mean, those are things we can certainly work within and what we can do. We will do that. It's a great idea. It builds trust and that relationship that we've talked about. So along those ideas, it was a great idea. I don't think we need to go any further delving into it. I think we can do that with staff and begin that process of figuring out what we can, if we can just do McGee Field or whether we can expand it to other ones. We'll get the cost. What we need is the idea, and we appreciate the idea that you brought forward, and it's already been voted on. So it's one of the things that I think will be in the report, and we're already beginning to look and see what we can do with it.
I love that, and thank you.
So the bottom line is we have, if I'm doing my math right, we have 2 meetings in January and 2 meetings in February, and then possibly 1 or 2 in March before this is done. And I'm gonna get to Healy. So I really want to get into these structural changes. I love the McGee Field concept, and I think it can be beneficial. But as we may soon find out with Haley, there's a lot more structural things we need to get done. So yes.
Yeah. So it's on. All right. So is there a way that this report becomes a living document? I mean, obviously, we have so much that they're going to eventually have to get to, but there are also things, like you said, they're already implementing. And I'm just kind of tired of getting caught up in talking about, well, we should decide what they do with the money and we shouldn't. No, just start making this report, start compiling like we started in the first place.
Yeah.
So that we can continue getting to work and continue to getting feedback from our community.
So that's a really good point. It's what I was getting to next. I think we need to have not a budget line item list, but a specific set of priorities, not vague, broad assertions. This is my view. I'm glad to hear other thoughts of what exactly we want PPD to accomplish, whether they think it's a good idea or not. It is not this committee's charge to play along with everyone, right? But it is its charge to be civil, respectful, and constructive with having a good rapport with PPD and the City Hall. So we may not agree or disagree all the time, but I think you're exactly right, and we need to start creating a living document that would have annual, reviews, right? And my envisioning is we have a report card, whether it's on the website or otherwise, where we can, yes, start checking things off. That's the only way we can measure success for this committee outside, less use of force incidents and less deaths. So I think that's very important. So with that said, we have 4, 5, 6 meetings left. It's a discussion item tonight, but I'd like to start the next meeting with the new year, because I know we have the holidays coming up and everyone's preoccupied. But come next meeting, we come back with the priorities we had already set for us back in August or September. And then we start refining those and potentially adding more things for the report in March. I think that's, from my view, what we should begin doing.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, are you envisioning all of us come back with their priorities and then we discuss them?
Correct, and then we just start weeding them down and then obviously voting on each particular item. The transition team was a little different. I hate to keep comparing things, but I believe it worked fairly well. to the credit of those members and the chair of that team, because it was a little different because you had category leaders that developed their own priorities. It's a little harder for us because each of us is not specializing in one particular thing, although we could be, but I think that gets into the weeds a little bit more. So we'll all come together and start weeding things out. I think that's possibly the best route forward at each successive meeting, and then hopefully by the 1st of March, we can have something that's whittled down that we can all agree on, because we will have to vote on this. Mr. Barry?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Did I understand the deputy chief correctly when he said that the Florida, that their policies, procedures, and general orders, everything reflected what's in the Florida chief's report? So that means they're doing all of that?
That's what I understood.
Okay. Well, that will impact some of our priorities possibly.
I think so. And it is important to know that is a police chief's report, right? So not to say they're biased, but it's obviously got its own realm of interest there.
I know, but I read some of the things within that report, and I agree with them. You know, almost everything in there I agreed with, and there are things related to use of force and things that even I think anyone off the street might agree with. So I do feel like it could be a biased source, but there are some good recommendations in there. And I appreciate you bringing that to our attention.
Oh, sorry, Deputy Chief, go ahead.
Yes, I just want to say that is correct. Those recommendations that were in that report are currently reflected in our general orders. The document goes on to some things they don't agree with and some different things. Warning shots, for example, we prohibit warning shots, period. We don't allow warning shots, so that's just one of the things that we don't allow. It was some discussion in that document about that, but those recommendations on the front end of that document are reflected in our general orders.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you.
just a quick question. One more thing. So were there changes made to the policies, any changes made as a result of that report that we need to go back and look at? If we may have looked at them like weeks ago or something, have there been changes made?
The date of that report was September, and I believe all of those general orders reflected that. At the time that report came out, I believe we already reflected those.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Barry?
Okay,
Oh, go ahead.
I'll go ahead. So in the report, it talks about the firing of a warning shot, and you said you guys did not take that recommendation.
We prohibit warning shots.
Okay. So is there an alternative to that recommendation? Or are you just gonna shoot?
We give a warning when feasible, and we discussed that a little bit at the last meeting. If it's feasible for our officer to give a warning, they will give a warning. There are circumstances where it may not be feasible for an officer to give a warning. They may immediately come under fire. It's not feasible for them to give a verbal warning at that time when they're under the imminent threat of death or great bodily harm, or someone else is under imminent threat, death or great bodily harm. So when it's feasible, they do give a warning, but there are circumstances where it just would not be feasible.
Okay. And so I do understand that if you're being fired upon, then I understand if someone else is in danger, I understand that as well. But to fire beyond that, I would think that there should be some type of procedure that says, don't look at that.
It's currently in our general order. When feasible, they will give a verbal warning.
Okay.
Deputy Chief, can you maybe explain what it might feel like
Yeah.
to be in a position where there's imminent danger? Because I don't think that there is an alternative. Correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're going in and you're about to use force, it seems like everybody's yelling all the time. Police, we're coming in. You know, there's just all the time, right? Am I right?
The different circumstances, search warrants, they're required to knock and announce.
Okay.
If they're able to, and it's feasible, they give commands to the person to try to gain that voluntary compliance. But I can tell you, as someone who's been shot at by a rifle that went through the headrest of my police car, there are times when it's not feasible to give a warning.
So there is no alternative to what Mr. Durant is saying. When you need to shoot, you have to just shoot.
Yes.
Thank you.
When they can, they give a warning. If the circumstances are that they can't,
And if they can, what is the warning?
it could be a myriad of things. I don't want to speculate on what an individual circumstance is.
I mean, just give me
And
some of the
there's-
examples.
There's no standard warning to give. It's going to be dictated by what's happening in front of that officer at that time and that moment of what's going on, of what they are giving orders for that person to do. It'll be dictated by the situation, the surroundings, the environment, who's there, how many people are there. There are a myriad of things, and it would be, it's not proper for me to speculate on each individual circumstance of what could be happening. What if 10,000 different situations for an officer to be in?
Deputy Chief, there's one instance I know that happened here in one that where there was a individual who had a gun pointed at another individual that we were responding to because neighbors had called us. We gave warning before any shots were fired. We told the individual to put the gun down. The individual continued to have the gun pointed at the other individual, and there was a shot fired at that point. But the warning was given, and they were told to put the gun down, and all that was there, and there were multiple people actually there witnessing the whole process. So, I mean, you don't have to speculate. You can go through real instances where we have done that. Now, again, I know we're here on one instance where we didn't do that. I see that more as the outlier, and I think that's why, even if you have good policies and procedures, it doesn't mean that mistakes won't get made. I think the question becomes, how do you deal with the mistakes of what they've done? And I think the city can only stand by the actions we've taken. But I mean, again, that's what we said. These policies and procedures will be followed, and if you do not follow them, you will not be here at the city of Pensacola.
Thank you. Jonathan, you had something?
Yes. One second. In a case where there is not imminent danger, but the officer may have his or her weapon drawn, is there a script for de-escalation, I think is what Mr. Durant was trying to get at? Because there are instances where a weapon from the officer may be drawn where the situation didn't necessarily call for that.
Is there a script for the officer to say something specific?
I guess from your question, the answer is no.
I'm asking you, is that your question? Are you asking if we have a specific script or dialogue that the officer is supposed to give?
Well, de-escalation techniques, more so, because that can go into verbal scripts, so.
We have de-escalation within our general orders. There's not a specific script. And when you say script, my interpretation of script is there an exact wording that the officer has to go by, and there is not.
Okay.
But I do believe the intent is to de-escalate, always is to de-escalate.
Our intent is always, if we can, to de-escalate the situation.
And
That's our
I
goal.
do want at least the record to reflect, the question was, what about warning shots? I don't believe warning shots help de-escalate anything. I think that would be, if anything, likely to respond back. So I think the question started with warning shots.
I think his question was alternatives to warning shots.
Right. And Mr. Remington?
I have a question for you, Deputy Chief. What is a blue team?
Blue Team is the reporting system. It's the name of the reporting system which we submit our use of force reports through. It's just the name of the system.
So is it like a software program?
Yes.
And then, so if there's an instance where there's any use of force, like if an officer discharges a weapon, is a blue team report, does something go into blue team?
Yes, a report is initiated in Blue Team.
And then that report goes to a supervisor or to a designated person?
It goes through multiple levels of supervision.
Okay, any of them, the layers, can you describe that for me? Because I'm having trouble following it in the policies. It's all personnel inside the department.
If an officer is involved in a use of force, they will draft their use of force report within the blue team system, is then forwarded to their supervisor, who will review it. There's video available, they'll review the video, review the reports. They'll make a determination at their level whether or not the force was justified. Once they make their finding, it's forwarded to the next level of supervision, which is usually a lieutenant. Lieutenant will review it and then make their finding. Then it's forwarded to the division captain, who will then review the use of force. It's then forwarded to our professional standards lieutenant, who makes sure all the boxes are checked, everything's been done, completed that needs to be completed, and it's then forwarded to me and then to the chief of police.
And the chief can decide if anybody else needs to look at it?
Correct.
I just want to remind all the board members, I actually forgot to remind everyone, make sure you're using microphones. The public has asked about it a few times. Jonathan? No, it's okay.
It's fine.
I did want to follow up just because you said that there are no scripts in a situation where a officer with a weapon drawn in a non-imminent dangerous situation. Well, there are no scripts, period. So would the police officer identifying themselves in that situation, is that part of the adherence to the policies that you follow?
If they're able to identify themselves, you mean yell police?
Police.
If it's feasible, they'll yell police. They may yell police. It may be very apparent that they're the police. If they've arrived in a marked Pensacola police car with lights going and full uniform, that the circumstance may not call for that, but there is no specific dialogue for them to say.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further discussion related to that question? Thank you, Deputy Chief.
You're welcome.
So again, going back, it was my intention that, I don't know how many we previously discussed at our past meetings, our initial priorities, if you want to call them that. But the intention of the next meeting is to bring those back, which I will do to this board. We do have them recorded, and then ask each and every one of you to please bring back what you think we should potentially adopt as a policy procedure program budget item, and then we can get working on that. Because again, it's fully my intention while I'm chair to make sure we get this report done, among other things. Anything else?
Yeah, do we have those items on a compound sheet of paper or document, or are they just at every meeting?
As of now, I do not have them.
If we could have a list sent out of all of them.
Oh,
maybe-
sure, I get what you're saying.
Yeah, so they're all outlined on one document.
So certainly, I'll work with staff to make sure those are all sent out prior to next meeting. I'll get with Kimmy.
Are you speaking about your recommendations that you've
Yes.
made? They're on the minutes from last meeting. I listed them all out for you.
What about
Yep.
the,
Yeah, I think we're referring to the initial priorities that we kind of wrote out on the whiteboards. It must have been 30 or 40 of them.
Those were in the previous minutes, but I'm happy to compile everything and just send it in one email.
That'd be great. And I'll work with you on that. So that answered your question? Thanks. Well, if that's all for that one, I'll move on to the next item so we can get swiftly moving. Okay? So this was an item that I had wanted, and again, I think this is something we could include in the report, but I think it's easy enough to accomplish now that we could have a kind of a quick discussion on it and see where we want to go forward. And I may ask the deputy chief up here again. I would like to have the complaint and even commendation process streamlined so that we can ensure citizens have, extreme accessibility to do this. I will say, because I think they're gonna check me on this, I did eventually find the online complaint portal, but it was rather difficult to find, Deputy Chief, but I'll let you just speak on it real quick.
I can look at that. On our website, can go to our website and on the professional standards tab, go to that. Citizens have the ability to file a complaint through an online portal, which is fillable online and distributed to our professional standards lieutenant. They have the ability or the option to print out a PDF complaint form, fill it out by hand and return it to us. There's a link to our professional standards lieutenant's email that they could email a complaint, and his phone number is there. We'll take complaints, any of those. We take complaints over the phone. We'll take complaints on a loose leaf notebook paper that are dropped off to us. They don't have to use those forms. They're there for the convenience of someone who may have a complaint. But we do have it set up where they can go online, submit it electronically. They can print it if they're happy to do that, or any by telephone or in person drop it off.
I'll go to Mr. Barron in a second. I wanted to ask, one, as of now, is it PPD's policy that these complaints or comments can't be anonymous? Must they have a name attached to them?
They do not.
So to clarify, they must.
They do not have to have a name.
Okay. I did see that there was asterisks requiring the names, but maybe we can make that more clear.
I'll look at that and I can make
on the
that,
form.
we can make that adjustment. It's not required on on the form they print out, the PDF, you're not required to fill in your name.
And is there an ability to, because it was rather hard for me to find, and maybe I'm just illiterate when it comes to that kind of stuff, but we can discuss this too, but can we make that a direct link on the homepage of the PPD website?
I'm not computer savvy, but I'm sure that's something we can discuss and see if there's an easier format through IT.
Mr. Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I totally agree. I think that should be front and center somewhere on the webpage. It should be easy for citizens to get to it. I also like your phrasing of a complaint or a commendation. I'm not sure what it says on the site, whether it just predisposes you to do a complaint or is it just a comment. How is it listed on there?
In that section, it's complaints.
Okay, see, I'd love to see it where it's feedback, whatever, and it could be a complaint, it could be a positive. I mean, there have been instances where I've had interactions with police where I've made a positive. You know, if we've seen somebody in the neighborhood didn't belong there, they've come out, they've talked to me. You know, I think we need to make it open so it can be both ways. Clearly, more people complain than commend, but you may get some, and I think that's a good thing. But I really think it needs to be easy to get to.
I will say this, all of our emails, command staff and many of the lieutenants and even sergeants, their emails there are direct links in the website, and we do receive through that. We receive emails from citizens, thanking us. They go to our Facebook and tag us in Facebook and things like that on post, or sometimes it's just a handwritten card that they send in. So we do receive it in that, but I appreciate your effort to make it easier for people to recognize our officers.
And one more thing. But the only way for them really to do it anonymously, unless they make up an email address, is to do it through that form. So they may want to do it that way, so it just needs to be easy, and thank you.
Yes.
What about putting a link on 311? That's where we send everybody to do anything related to the city. So if you had something on 311 where people could easily access the comments and commendations.
And that was my first thought too, and I don't want to hold you up because I don't know if you can answer all these things, but if we could have PPD integrated into the 311 system, I don't know if that's even possible, but my idea was, of course, anyone could go on and email a lieutenant or yourself, but.
Certainly. We receive information through 311. It's not, I don't control the 311 system or the webmaster. That would be through the
Mr. Mayor, do you have
city
anything on that?
administration.
I do, and the one thing I've learned is you can, and I think we need to put it on the front page, and we'll be happy to figure out how to do it. But again, it's so based on what the individual uses. They could say, Drew, I know you're a 311 person, to orient it to you, but there are plenty of people who aren't 311 people. I think in some ways, keeping 311 and allowing them to get there, I think the true complaint, we can say, and again, we can put something on the 311 that says if you have a complaint or commendation about the police, there is a place to go to the website. I think some of it we do have to keep internally to them, and some people will never even think about 311, and they'll go to the website and say, well, why isn't it on the web? I mean, there's a little bit about how we do it and how we need to keep it tracked. So I do think it would be good to get with the IT people. I have no problem to place something that asks you or reminds you if that's what you want to do, that you can find it here. I think having it on, as Charles was saying, on the front of the page all those things, I think we can certainly work with, we have no problem with. But I think we got to be careful I know you're very 311, Mr. Chairman, but I don't think everybody's 311, and some people may look it up and they say, well, now you're not looking up the way I would look it up. So I think we can do some things, but I think we need to reference it back to like one location, keep it centralized. We can reference people out of 311 to go to the website for the Pensacola Police and then fill one out there.
Thank you. Gina, do you have something?
Yes, I appreciate how accommodating the Pensacola Police Department is about receiving complaints, but my only concern with that is just if there's so many avenues to receive complaints that there's room for some to get lost. But also I'm curious who's reviewing the complaints and how frequently are they reviewing the complaints?
First of all the complaints are routed to the professional standards lieutenant. So he's the initial hub of the complaints. And depending on the nature of the complaint, it may be investigated by the supervision of the officer, or it may be investigated by professional standards. And each complaint is once again utilized through that blue team system now. And they are forwarded in the same manner that we discussed the use of force.
Right, but how frequently, I guess,
How
is it as they
frequently what?
come, or?
As they come, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we do not let a complaint sit. We investigate. If someone makes a complaint, we investigate it.
Oh,
Haley, do you have?
oh,
Oh,
sorry, go ahead.
you know what, it was petty. Go ahead.
I'd like to know, are the complaints documented so that they can be reviewed, perhaps by year?
I don't know how you would pull them up. It's in a computer system. I imagine you could do it by year, but I don't know that. But they are all maintained. And once the investigation is
I would
complete,
think
it's a
that would
public
be an
record.
important factor to have a review on, to understand what that scale does. Obviously, if you see a graph, then the complaints are doing this, you got a problem. But if the complaints are all coming in and they're documented, that you should be able to go back and look and see how many there are.
Every complaint we receive is documented.
But, well, I mean, can we pull that data is what I'm saying. Can we look at how many there are in a given time? And the other thing that I was gonna suggest was, as we're on this topic, maybe I guess all of us will go back to the computer now and go through the tabs and look at this, but maybe we should all be looking at how this is accessible on the web.
Sure.
And what the citizens have to go through. And then the third point I'd like to make is perhaps this should be a recommendation to be added to our report tonight.
Great points, and we'll come back to that. Mr. Bear?
Deputy Chief, I just want to ask are the complaints, is that in any way part of your accreditation? Do they look at that at all when you get accredited?
They look at our process and all our general orders. Everything we do is reviewed by accreditation.
But they don't look at like the complaints that come in or like the number of complaints or anything like that?
That, I don't know the answer to that question. I can research that and get you the answer, but I don't know if they look specifically at that.
And just to clarify the question that was down for our new member down here, so if a complaint comes in to say the chief or to you, it gets routed, all of those get routed to the person you spoke of?
Correct, professional standards.
Okay, great, thank you.
Okay,
Go ahead, Haley.
okay, so just to solidify, we would be able to pull these complaints, be able to see maybe a record of how many had certain outcomes? Is that a thing? Because you said that they're stored.
I see what
Like, is that, because
I
I
understand
would
your question.
love to see a graph, literally, of what are the outcomes of these complaints?
I don't know that it could be put in graph form. That would require the creation of a document. I don't know how that system pulls that information.
Okay. And, is there anything, and this probably isn't really a question for you, more so than the city and the city attorney, but is there a way that we would be able to implement a third-party complaint portal? Because the original recommendation when we asked for the CPAC was that we have a civilian review board, but with a civilian complaint system where people felt comfortable to come to a civilian to give their complaints, instead of, I have to walk up to the police to give this paper to them, because everybody's not gonna have access on the web, and obviously it's hard, to get on the web. So I don't know if that's a question for y'all or for you, that, would that be something that we have in our ability?
You mean legally?
Legally?
You're asking if someone else could drop the complaint off to us?
No, if we could have a third party,
A third party investigate the complaints?
not to necessarily just investigate, but to at least take those in.
Well, I don't think anything becomes more citizen-oriented than City Hall. I mean, if somebody needed to feel like comfortable that they needed to make the complaint here, I think that's perfectly happy. We could do that. I can't, I mean, anything we could certainly take. If you want us to be a place that we can get them from people because they don't want to feel comfortable going to the police department. You know, I certainly think those would be along those lines, or some other city facility we could work within that. But I mean, they're going to have some consistency within form. So I want to be consistent how they do it. But if you're saying simply the location of where they go to, they don't want to go to the police department, we can find a different facility for somebody to be able to drop stuff off.
And I will say, you know, this might be opening Pandora's box a little bit. And again, I don't know if we have the ability legally or with consensus to do this, but, and I don't know the privacy concerns, but do we have the ability to actually take these complaints and either review them confidentially as a board or select group of us?
I'll tell the complaints against officers and the investigative process is governed by Florida Statute 112.
Yeah. But there's nothing that prohibits a citizen coming to us and saying, hey, this happened to me, and us filling out a form and submitting it. I mean, you know, people can do that. I mean, they can also find a lawyer to do that. They can go walk into Lakeview, you know, lots of different, you know, mechanisms for getting the help they need to make those complaints. The question, I think, what I'm hearing is there data? We don't know the answer for sure if blue teams can pull it. It's possible that there might be a way to pull that data from your database. It may not be possible. But then the other question would be, when Haley was asking about outcomes, I think it would be valuable to know how many of those complaints are escalated to something other than, you know, like to what level. So without, you know, having confidentiality breached or your officers, you know, safety, perhaps there's a mechanism internally that you could adopt that's, you know, well, stage one is, this guy looked at me funny and maybe y'all don't do anything about that, or like, hey, you know, somebody doesn't like the way you look, I don't know. And then maybe stage two is you're counseled. And then you don't respond to us about what happens, but you just say, this number of complaints in the year of 2021, because we wouldn't be able to do it for 2020, were escalated to level 3. Or this number of complaints, citizens' complaints from the website were escalated to, you know, or no action was taken on a certain number of them. Is that something that you would be interested in before we start going down that?
We review every complaint up through the chief level. That the last stop could potentially, you know, is Chief Leiter to review if there's discipline involved. So every complaint goes through that process, whether it's investigated at the shift supervisor level and then sent through the chain of command, or if it's done by professional standards. Each and every one is reviewed at a command staff level.
And then, of course, if we have a complaint button put on the first page of the police department's website, the number of complaints is going to go up dramatically. So we also have to, you know, consider that the ease of being able to complain is going to necessarily increase the number of complaints, which may be a good thing or may be a bad thing, but we need to be able to watch for that if we do have any data, you know, so that it doesn't appear unnecessarily like all at once, you know, December 2020, everybody has a complaint about the police.
Right.
We, like I said, I'll just reiterate, we take every complaint seriously. We investigate every complaint. We want to get better. You have some outstanding people at the Pensacola Police Department, but we're accountable to ourselves and we're accountable to the community. So we take it very seriously. And if there is an issue, we address it. You know, we have data from our traffic stops based on reasons for the stop, race, age, number of occupants to track so that we can make sure that we don't have somebody who's out there stopping people of color at a disproportionate level. And we have those numbers and they run quarterly.
Can we have access to those numbers? Or would you think about that and get back with us?
Yes.
About whether that might be something that we could have access to?
Moving on, Jonathan, you had something real quick. No, Scott.
My question kind of dealt with tracking, with the complaint system, kind of what you touched on. Is there a way for it to show the system of complaints, for instance, how many complaints were in a given month, like for instance, last year, December?
Like I said, I don't know how the program can compile reports, but I can find that information out.
Well, I'm guessing if a person did a handwritten report, that wouldn't be necessarily in the system in the same way.
All of our reports now are use of force and complaints are entered in that blue team system. And before that, they were, back in the day when you handwritten things, there was another program that the information would be installed in. We still have that, and it will, for lack of a better term, throw a flag if we have an officer who's got a disproportionate amount of uses of force.
Okay.
It'll give us a warning so we can go review those and see, is there an issue or is it, you know, just the circumstances that officer was placed in. So we have those safeguards in place.
Okay, yeah, I was wondering if with the old system, if that data could still be tracked to
Yes.
compare with the new data.
Yes.
Okay.
Does the system give you a warning?
Yes.
Wow.
Scott?
Deputy Chief, thank you for going through this dialogue. I think this is an important part of the commission, is trying to build a better relationship and establish better lines of trust and communication with the department. And as I think Jonathan touched on my question, which is even citizen complaints that come in are entered into the blue team system. Is that correct?
Correct. If it comes in as a handwritten on a loose leaf notebook paper, it'll be scanned in to the system. We have the ability to scan it in, and then it's an attachment into that entry.
Do you think, would it be possible for us to just get someone to come in and maybe educate us a little bit more about how the blue team system works, so we can understand, you know, what it looks like, what kind of reports it generates, and then I guess at some point, the data in the blue team system does become a public record?
Complaints are public once they're closed and finished, and either completed with a finding or discipline against an officer. That's when they become public.
And so the data presumably does some sort of, you know, gathers the data, compares, has the ability to track like complaints, track complaints by officers, and all that sorting can take place within the system.
I know it can sort by officer. I don't know that it can, I don't know how far down into the weeds it gets with tracking that type of stuff.
And I think
But we
that
can
might
find
be
out.
helpful if somebody who's really up on that system could explain to us what the functionality is and what type of data is reasonable to expect to see out of it, or what kind of reports we could generate.
I really like that idea. I don't know how exactly we would do that. I imagine it's all on an internet server, and, you know, could we do it one-on-one or as a group?
I don't know that access into this room to bring it up on the screen would be possible.
So
But
maybe you can get back to us.
we can effort that and look at it and see how we can best give at least a demonstration on how that works.
Right, thank you, Kyle.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, this actually jogged my memory for my own questions, but you requested that data, I believe, early on, and I know, I don't have it with me, I just checked, but I know it's on my computer at home because I reviewed it. You've got 3 years of that data, and it's outlined. I recall looking at racial issues, both complaints by the citizen and complaints internally by the police, whether the police were courteous, how they were rectified. So there is a document out there. We have, as a matter of fact, it's on, Kimmy sent it to us.
Yep.
It's within our pack, so we all have access to that.
Right, we have the document, multiple folks touched on it, including you. Having it visualized is the key, especially for, digesting it with
Yeah.
the public and us. I have no idea how to do that. I know we have a GIS department at the PBD, but that's something we can explore.
Well, and I
further.
think, if I gotta go back and look at my computer, but I believe that I input all of that data into an Excel spreadsheet, which is why I requested some of the data be sent to us in Excel, because it was very timely to
Right.
do that. But I've got that data in an Excel spreadsheet. If I can send it back out and we can all review
Okay.
what the results are. It's easier to manipulate.
Mr. Bear?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think we got two issues here. One is easily settled. It's getting on the front page. Sounds like they're okay with that. My real question, and which is not going to be settled tonight, I'm not asking for it to be, is where, like, a complaint comes in, okay, it's a loose leaf piece of paper, gets into the system, goes to professional standards person. What level is that person?
He's a lieutenant who reports directly to me.
Okay, so it goes to lieutenant. From there, what decisions are made as to how far that goes? Is the lieutenant a gatekeeper? Where does it go from there? That's the issue that I want to get into, and where we might have some policy issues that I would like to talk about.
It would depend on the nature of the complaint. If it's a courtesy type issue, that would likely be forwarded to the officer's supervisor to investigate, whole body camera, conduct interviews, those kind of things.
Okay.
If it's something major, then the chief, the professional standards lieutenant would inform me, and then we would instruct him to conduct a professional he would conduct the investigation and not push down to the shift supervisor level.
Who decides whether it's major or not? The lieutenant?
The lieutenant's gonna see what the complaint is.
Okay.
If it's something he feels is major, he's gonna bring it to me and the chief,
Okay.
and then the chief will order a professional standards investigation.
Is this process outlined in your policies and procedures anywhere?
I'd have to pull it up exactly to look at it.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Ms. Castro?
I'm curious, when you say like the lieutenant's deciding, if it's a major, sorry, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, if they're deciding if it's major or how large the issue is there some kind of scale they're looking at? Like maybe like you always say like 1 to 10, but like maybe it has like, 1 being like the officer looked at me a certain way, or 10 being that he called me the N-word, like something like that.
Not necessarily a scale, but it's, determined on what the nature of the complaint is. It also could be determined on what level the complaint is on. If it's a complaint on a lieutenant, then I would have the professional standards lieutenant conduct that investigation. I'm not gonna push that to a sergeant to investigate a superior.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? I wanted to go back to, Jonathan, go ahead.
I guess following Ms. Castro, is the lieutenant who is over the professional standards, are they subjective to the entire process? It's kind of what Mr. Bear said, are they the sole gatekeeper? Because that's kind of what it sounds like.
The complaints are driven through that office.
Right.
I can tell you the professional standards lieutenant is one of the most trained positions in the department, very specific and extensive training, so that they're able to take those complaints, get them entered correctly, and make sure that all the process is followed, so that the citizen's complaint is heard, investigated thoroughly and properly, and that state law which governs that process is followed.
Who's the professional standards lieutenant?
I'm sorry?
Who is it?
I'm sorry.
Who's the lieutenant
Who's the
for
lieutenant?
professional standards?
Currently, the lieutenant for professional standards is Lieutenant Bruce Martin.
All right, going back to the original discussion item, and we'll see where we want to go from here. My intention was to certainly, if this can be done right away with the, as Mr. Bear pointed out, the one part of this issue, having it placed on the homepage, and highlighted and prioritized, not only the complaint portal, but a commendation portal set up ASAP. I think that's something I could go along with. I don't know if we need to have that as an action item, but is that something we want to discuss later, or does the consensus feel that we can do that now?
Yeah. Second, whatever.
Mr. Chairman, I think that's fine. I think they agreed to do that, pretty much. And I think
Yeah,
that the mayor.
I mean, I just asked Keith, I said, that's something we get with Trudy and get with Kevin, and we'll get that done.
Okay,
But
thank you.
your item is broader than that. so-
Right. Yeah, so, I don't think we can settle tonight,
No.
and nor do we have to, but the larger item going forward, and I will bring it back with one of my recommendations in the January meeting, is to do a deeper dive into the review process and all the facets of it. Deputy Chief, did you have one more thing?
Mr. Chairman, just to clear, I can clear up one question now. I received information that our system is able to pull reports by the finding or conclusion of the report.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, Ms. Knight?
I think it would be beneficial for us to actually hear from the professional standards lieutenant, and to maybe have him at one of our near future meetings as we discuss this, because I think that he can answer a lot of questions for us that we might have about, how the process works from his end.
Absolutely. Let's see if I can pull them both, not only the demonstration of the internal processing system, but the lieutenant too. I'll work on that for upcoming meetings soon. So if that was all for this item, I will move on, unless, Mr. Kopacek, did you still want to make that a recommendation, or we'll keep it for?
I mean, I'm open.
Yeah.
Fine.
I think it'll be better just to bring it back with everything else, so.
I think it's a good item, and I think,
Right.
it needs to be added to the list, and we need to hammer it out a little more, so.
Okay, I will bring it back January 5th, our next meeting. Moving on, I know we are hitting time here. These should be relatively easier, fluid items. Number 7 was, again, something I put on the agenda. Obviously, we all come from different backgrounds, creeds, whatnot, and not only that, we all have different familiarity levels with how police agencies operate. I think it would be beneficial for each of us, whether it's one-on-one or if there's an ability to do a group setting. And again, it doesn't have to be required, but I think it'd be beneficial for all of us to at least have the opportunity to get more familiar with how PPD operates. I have not discussed this with them as of yet, but they did get the agenda when you all got it and the public got it. But these were 2 of the items that I think would be beneficial. One is at least mentioning the fact that the Citizens Police Academy is an option for all members of the public, but maybe we should all do it. I have not done it myself, but I've heard it's very, has anyone done it on this board? What are your overall thoughts on doing it as a productive experience?
Yeah, I brought that up in one of the first meetings. I think it's an excellent, it's lengthy. It was about 8 or 9 weeks, once a week, for about 5 hours a night. But I thought it was fantastic. It goes through from the beginning to the end, and it gives you a tremendous perspective of the entire department. I don't know that they're doing it with COVID.
Right.
But I think it's an excellent idea that every member of this committee should be involved.
When is the next one, or is there enough?
Unfortunately, that's been a casualty of the COVID,
Yeah.
because that is an in-person, hands-on
Group setting.
setting. So as soon as we're able to get that going, after, once we work through the COVID issues and we're able to do that, each one of you will absolutely have a seat in that academy.
Is there also the ability to at least record portions of that? So if somebody can't attend, that maybe the next time you guys do an online course, you can submit, and that way if someone wants to do that academy without the hands-on portion, obviously, is that something that y'all would be willing to do?
Yeah, we're willing to record that and put that out. Shouldn't be an issue. There may be some challenges with some of the things, but.
Sure.
If that audience is reduced, is it possible during COVID? I mean, we're sitting in this setting, and I recall in that class, there were 30 or 40 people. And that's a big room. If that audience is reduced, is it possible to?
we can have that discussion with the mayor's office.
Okay.
And this could be something where it's a special class just for us, right?
And I will tell you, though, that I think some of the highlights of that class, and those of you who have been in it, are the hands-on portions. I think that is
Right.
a beneficial insight that would greatly impact you to have that hands-on scenario type immersive interaction. And I don't want to give you a watered-down version.
No, it was
what-
great
what
interaction.
goes
I mean,
on.
we were outside with the SWAT team, we were dealing with the dogs, we were down in the investigations, every single part of it.
It's very hands-on, and I would hate for you who have not been through it to get less of an experience because of COVID. But I will guarantee each and every one of you in this room a seat as soon as we're able to do that.
Thank you. And Kyle, I know you didn't mean to, but you touched on a good point there. Obviously, seeing the SWAT team and the dogs is great. You know, from a military background, I love it. But in addition to that, and this can be the one-on-one aspect, if each of us wants to see our own perspective within the internal operations of PPD, but letting us choose kind of what aspect or division or department within the department that we could kind of look into. I think that'd be beneficial, and I wanted to open up for discussion, but, you know, me personally, I'm a big fan of the bike patrols, go figure. And I think that program should be expanded, and I'd like to actually go out and do a ride-along with the bike patrols. I think we have 2 officers, 2 or 4. I don't know what each of you may be interested in, or if you've even gone into the department for a ride-along or something like that. And I wanted to open that up for discussion, if you think that'd be beneficial, or you think it'd get us too close to the department we're trying to review. Mr. Mayor.
I did want to say, again, COVID has been a challenge for all of us. I think this is one of the things that Tommy, Chief Leiter talked about originally that he would have loved to have done and is giving everybody this. But I think even at a minimum, certainly a ride-along opportunity, if you want to bike along with the bike patrol or ride along with someone else, I think it would be a good experience. And I think it's something that, you know, when I don't know that Kevin and I have necessarily talked about it, but certainly we've talked about stuff before, looking at doing something along that to give you that opportunity. I think it's certainly a good thing. I know it was one of the first things I did was had the opportunity to spend a work day over there and see everything from dispatch to all kind of things. And then we did go out with SWAT, and it was. I very clearly remember it because to an extent you're thinking most jobs you go to, you do some work, you do this, it's okay, you're going home and go on. And all of a sudden when we're sitting there about to go out and they're like, okay, this is for you. And I'm like, what do you mean? They're like, this bulletproof vest, this you need to put this on. I was like, well, I'm not running in the house or anything. They're like, well, you're going to be there, so you need to wear this. And it kind of gives you a realization of understanding what the job entails and the fact that you can't guarantee what you're going to be walking into. So I think along those lines, it does give you an idea and a perspective to understand a little bit about what they go through. I certainly, you know, again, I certainly realize and appreciate, you know, how you're doing it one way or the other, Mr. Chairman, and wanting to be sure if you can still objectively do stuff. But overall, from our perspective, we would love to participate in some way just to show you what it looks like in some small way, what happens, and so you can participate in it.
Thank you. Did anyone have anything on that? Is it a bad idea? Because again, this is my item I brought up. Go ahead.
I'm a relationships guy, you know, again, so I think it's about the relationships that you make going in and seeing those officers face to face, you know, getting to where you recognize them and you know who they are. And then down the road, I think that affords us a better opportunity where if we do run into something, we know we can call Officer so-and-so down at PPD and ask him this question, or say to him, I've got this problem in my community, how would you recommend that I deal with it? So I don't think it's necessary for us as committee members to separate ourselves from PPD. I think perspective is vital in being able to make informed decisions. But I would also add that I think that it's as important to understand things from the officer's perspective as it is to understand things from the citizen's perspective. So I think that as long as we maintain that balance, we're not going to stray off into anything we don't want to do.
Very good. Deputy Chief?
I appreciate your comments, and I think a guiding principle of cooperation in this is, what we're looking for, rather than confrontational. So I don't think that gets us anywhere. So we are looking for that cooperation and that team approach to this. And we're open and available. If you're interested in doing ride-alongs to see if that's something that you as a committee are interested in with safeguards, we can make that happen. Because it's one thing to sit in here and talk about it. It's a very different thing to sit in that car at 2:00 in the morning and respond to whatever's going on. Becomes more tangible and real to you. In that situation, if that's something you're interested in, then we can effort making that happen.
Thank you. And that could be an ongoing thing. I'll follow up with the administration on the feasibility of it, at least one-on-one, but if any of you have, different perspectives on that, please bring them forward.
Yeah, and I think as each one of us do it, we bring our experiences back to this group.
Exactly. Yes, Sam?
Can I hang out with the professional standards lieutenant instead?
See, that's
I'm not getting in a cop car, I'm sorry.
That's what I was going at.
So that's where I draw the line.
I
I'm
have
not doing
PTSD
ride
from
along.
it.
Huh?
I have PTSD.
Yeah, that's really.
And
where
that's what I meant by
It's-
obviously the SWAT team part is great, getting in the cars is great, but I do want us to get outside of that. I think it's effective, the bike patrols, because you're not in a multi-ton vehicle going by someone's house. You're possibly going by and making sure everyone's okay. There's homeless outreach, there is K-9, juvenile detention. There's many other facets of PPD operations that I think each of us could benefit from looking into.
You think that'll move me up in the line to get the COVID-19 shot?
There you go. Essential worker. So with that, I wanted to get to our last item unless there was anything else.
Drew, though, I just would say, we don't want to force anybody to do anything you don't want to do.
Right. Thank you. The last item was another thing that I think would be beneficial for the committee. Obviously, COVID is still a concern, but we're in a much better time now with vaccines rolling out. So that was the issue of town halls being held. Unfortunately, if we are to have a report done by March, that does kind of compress things a little bit to get this done, but I still think it is possible to go out in the community with safeguards. I talked with the city administrator a little bit about this, and I also wanted to get feedback from the committee on how we could do this, if we should do this, geographically where we should do it. I don't think we should do it at City Hall. I think a key piece of public engagement for cities is to stop having meetings at city halls and start going out into the communities. So is there any feedback on that? Mr. Barrett?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I know we have community centers all over. We could utilize those facilities to some extent, I think. Are you looking at doing town halls as a group or individual town halls in various areas?
I'm open to both. Honestly, I haven't thought about it that much to have a preference for either. Part of me thinks it could be more beneficial to do it one-on-one, because we can't do it in duos, I don't think.
Right.
Because we all are different, and we all.
As long as you notice it, you can do
Right.
it. I mean, more than one person can be there, but. you have to notice it.
And the other point was, we all technically are appointed by, not just city council members that are geographically have districts, but the mayor, and I think that's it. So I think that's something we need to discuss. Do we have it as a group or individually? Are we allowed to go out and have these town halls?
Let me also say, we are also efforting in some ways with virtual town halls. I know Councilwoman Myers is doing one. And again, there would be nothing that would prohibit any of y'all from doing an individual town hall meeting, and you certainly could do that. and that way a virtual one. But if you want to look at doing, I mean, we certainly can take this on the road. I think the challenge is, I don't want to take this committee on the road because of the things that we have to do with everything else we do, but taking a town hall on the road, absolutely. I think those would be very beneficial. I think there is some need to have this meeting in this room because of the ability we have to record it and do the other things. But as far as the town hall, yeah, I think we'd be agreeable to taking it on the road. The biggest challenge we have is obviously dealing with COVID. We'd have to, you know, it wouldn't be as normal as some town halls, but, you know, also looking at virtual town hall, we'd be happy to do that as well.
So I had a quick question for either the mayor or staff. I'd like to at least, I don't know if they should all be individual or group settings, but at least do 2 group town halls with the intention of getting priorities directly from the community, not just through us as vessels. And my idea was one could be Sanders Beach as the largest west side community center, and then if it's open or opening Bayview, is there a timeline on that?
I'll look. I think at the first of the year we're kind of getting out there, but again we haven't necessarily been pressing because of the issue of not having you know, not necessarily looking for gatherings. But you know, I think we could. I mean, as big as you're going to want there, you still have the senior center at Bayview, but there are other places as well. Vickery's certainly large. There are other places you could have it.
Yeah, I'm just going to say I'll check on the schedule for Bayview, but I think you're on the right track. I think a large room, you know, we'd have to develop some kind of capacity for attendance, numbers of people to make sure we can get the right spread. But all of those have fire rated capacities for individuals. And if it's 250 and we say, okay, we're going to limit you at, you know, 25% or 50% of that number to make sure we have adequate spacing, we can do that. So I think it's a great idea. Just find large facilities in different parts of the city.
Right. And I'm open to others, you know, Pensacola High School or whatnot, but thank you, Mr. Administrator.
How about outside at the Wahoo Stadium?
Or, I didn't even think about that, it could be outside. Obviously weather's a concern, but that would be great too. So my idea would be if we come back January 5th and we get some dates hardened out, I can work with the administration on that. But if there's a consensus, we don't need to vote on anything, we can move forward on that. Anything else? Okay, well, that's all I had for today. I did want to ask if there's any open forum or public forum speakers. No, Kimmy? Thank you. And then one more thing, I'm trying to make this efficient, and I'm not going to ask y'all to say how good we've been doing, but I want to see if there's any comments on what we can do better, and then if there's any particular agenda items that you wish to have for the next meeting that we haven't already discussed, and just go ahead and open that up before we adjourn. Anything else? That's good. Okay, with that, I'll go ahead.